Okay, good evening, everybody. Welcome to our second virtual town hall meeting. I'm Joe Malash, and I am the superintendent here in the Cherry Hill Public School District. I would like to thank all of you for being with us this evening. It's a pleasure for you to be on and to spend some time as we're going to have some dialogue tonight about just kind of what's going on in the district. We put out about questions and responses and some discussion related to the current status with remote learning and hybrid learning. But that certainly does not need to be the only topic if you have questions that you would like to ask. So by way of introductions, it's my pleasure to begin by introducing Mrs. Lisa Seidel, who is our Board of Education President. Mrs. Seidel.
Thank you, Dr. Malash. Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. As Dr. Malash mentioned, my name is Lisa Seidel, and I'm the Board of Education President. We also have on the panel with us tonight, Mrs. Lori Neary, who's the Board of Education Vice President. Tonight, we're here representing the Board of Education to listen to and support both our community and our administration and staff members. By looking at this panel, there is a great many people on here who will be able to answer all of your questions tonight. Some of you may be wondering why only Mrs. Neary and I are participating on the panel. Because this is not an official scheduled board meeting, we are unable to have a quorum, which means we cannot have more than 5 board members. So we have invited the rest of the board members to dial in just as you are and listen remotely. And just scrolling through the list of attendees, I do know that we have Mrs. Matlack on, Carol Matlack on the line. We have Ms. Kim Friedel. And I think that is it for now. I'll jump in and let you know if other board members are able to join. And I'll turn it back over to Dr. Malash so we can get started. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mrs. Seidel. It's my pleasure to introduce some of the other panelists that are with us this evening. First, the Director of Curriculum, Dr. Farah Mahan. Our Director of People Services, Mrs. LaKoya Wethington. The President of the Cherry Hill Education Association, Mr. Steve Redfern. The Principal at Bret Hart Elementary School, Dr. Shilpa Deve. Mr. Mark Wisely, who is one of our Pupil Services Supervisors. And Mrs. Jennifer DeStefano, who's the SAC Counselor at Cherry Hill High School East. There are also some other folks, should we need their expertise. Our Director of Human Resources, Mrs. Nancy Adrian, is with us. Our Assistant Superintendent for Business / Board Secretary, Mrs. Lynn Sugars, and Mrs. Barbara Wilson, who's our Public Information Officer, are also in with us as well, although they do not have their cameras on. A special thank you as we begin, and I will thank them again at the end, are 2 of our technology folks, the Assistant Director of Technology, Mr. Mark Levinsky, and one of our technology specialists, Mr. Joe DiCarlo, who are able to keep all of this going for all of us. So the format of what we're going to do tonight is we asked people ahead of time and let them know they wanted to submit questions in advance. There was a spot on our website that folks could submit questions. We closed those questions off at noon today, so there was an ending time. And we did receive a number of questions that came through. We also received a couple of comments where there was no question included. I will not be reading the comments to go through. We will be reading the questions, however. And we also have people who are online, those of you that are watching us live. In fact, as I look at the screen right now, there are 137 attendees. After we did the first town hall meeting back in November, folks said we wanted to have more dialogue. We want to hear more questions from people who are actually on the line. So we will spend more time tonight doing that with more live dialogue going back and forth. I'm going to ask Mrs. Seidel to explain how the attendees can raise their hand if they would like to ask a question.
Sure. To submit a public comment, when prompted, we'll prompt you by name that shows up on our screen. Click the raise hand button in the bottom bar of the meeting or dial *9 to raise your hand if you're dialed in by phone. You'll be called out by name or identified via phone. A prompt will show on your screen asking if you want to unmute. And if you're joining by phone, please dial *6 to unmute your phone when prompted. Please give us your name before you start speaking. And we will follow the same protocol to start, just to make sure everybody gets an opportunity to speak. we'll have 3 minutes for comments for your questions. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Mrs. Seidel. So we will start, if there are any of the attendees, any of the folks that are on with us live, if you would like to ask a question, you can go ahead and queue up. Actually, you can see it at the top.
Okay, Carolina Bavad is our first question tonight. One minute, we're unmuting. Okay. Oh, did we lose her?
She's muted.
Oh, you're muted. You have to unmute your phone.
Got it.
There
Sorry.
you go. Now we can hear you.
Thanks. I was wondering, without any hybrid instruction and with the shortened school day, why are Mondays still designated as cooperative learning days and have not been reverted back to regular instructional days with all the changes in the We Return to Learn format?
Dr. Mahan, do you want to start with that one?
Yes, I can start with that question. So the We Return to Learn committees have worked diligently over the last 8 months to provide a schedule that really meets the needs of our students as well as our teaching staff. So when the schedule was originally constructed, that day was really dedicated to support teachers in a professional learning environment and also to break up the day. So break up the week, excuse me. So in our hybrid model, students attend school 2 days a week, and then that was a day for teachers to have professional development, for students to continue in their instructional day in a remote setting, and to reacclimate ourselves as a learning community. So I don't know if anyone else wants to chime in or if there was anything else, Mrs. Bavad.
Well, you just mentioned that was the idea when the instruction was going to be hybrid, but since there is no hybrid instruction, it seems like Mondays are sort of a lost day.
Well, actually at the high school, we changed the structure of that day based on feedback from students and teachers, and now they follow a day 5, day 6 rotation. So their day is a traditional day. At the middle school, as well as at the elementary school, we mirrored Monday similar to the remaining days in the week because we recognized that we needed to change the structure, and many students and families said that it was not seamless through the week with the disjointed day. I'll describe it as disjointed on Monday and then the rest of the days of the week. But now the 8 to 1 and the 9 to 1 schedule is the same at the elementary school, middle school, and high school, the 9:45 until 2:30. And I think Dr. DeVay also wants to chime in here. Go ahead, Dr. DeVay.
Mondays also allow us to provide a little additional extra time for the social emotional learning. This has definitely been probably the toughest experience that any of our children have faced. And so it allows for a little more of that time set aside for developing a lot of the character skills and things like resilience that unfortunately they've had to learn almost the hard way. It also allows us as a school to kind of do school-based activities. So, right now, and of course, I'm going to speak from the Heart lens mainly because that is what I know the most. We're looking at service learning projects, and each of the grade levels are talking about it separately. And then we'll come together as a whole school to kind of talk about what does that next step look like. So it allows for a little more flexibility in terms of trying to still kind of continue the school-based instruction that you tend to lose in the world of remote instruction. And so I think the social emotional piece of it is a very big component that that quite frankly, in the world that we are living in right now is more important than ever.
Thank you, ladies.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Pavad. Very good. Next one.
Are we doing
Oh, yeah,
alternate? And are you reading them in order? Do you want me to read one or do you want to read them all? Or?
Yeah, do you want to read the first one?
Yeah.
So we're not going to do, so the, as I mentioned, there was a comment and we're going through these through the written. I'm not sure why that screen is like that. Mr. Plavinsky or Mr. DiCarlo, can you get us back into are we on? Just want to make sure we have the right visual going on.
Yep, you are back to grid view.
We are, okay, thank you. We're going through the written questions in chronological order from the first one that was received. There are a handful that are literally word for word the exact same questions. We will mention the people as we go through that sent questions and thank them. We will not multiple times though read the same word for word questions. We did receive this a comment from Stefan Dombrowski. There was no question that was included in here. We do appreciate you sending it in, but as there is no question, we're not going to go through this one. So I'm going to ask Mrs. Seidel to ask the next question that is listed on here.
The first question we received via email is from Jill Roth Gutman. What is the district doing to roll out outdoor education so that schools can remain open even if there are positive COVID cases in our community? What creative solutions are being implemented and invested in so we can reopen safely? The answer I received from Dr. Malash via email was, we have a number of options for outdoor learning for students at each one of our schools, depending upon the temperature and the amount of precipitation. My question is, what are those options? Dr. Malash also informed me we are not able to hold all classes at all times outside of any of our buildings. While I understand not all schools can be accommodated with outdoor education at all times for all students, how many elementary students can be accommodated at one time? How many middle school? How many high school? If the Cherry Hill area remains coded orange on January 19th, will a tiered approach be considered with special education students returning first to school? Will the district offer or require all staff and/or students to be tested prior to returning to hybrid? Will the district consider randomly testing staff and students? If so, please use a spit test. It would be better for people with sensory issues.
Thank you, Mrs. Seidel. So the first part about outdoor classrooms and outdoor spaces, Dr. DeVay, Mr. Redfern, Dr. Mahan, do you want to talk of just some of what in your experience and in talking with teachers, share some of the options that are available?
Sure.
Go ahead.
We started out the year working with the technology department. They walked around, we identified areas to put in additional hotspots so that we could continue with instruction outside. The interesting part from working at Barton, Mann, and Hart is each of the landscapes of the buildings are so different that you could never truly turn around and say, let's put all of the students outside, let's put 200 students outside. I think it very much becomes a school by school decision to kind of ensure the safety of the students. Some of the buildings have outdoor classrooms. Hart has a beautiful outdoor classroom in the front of the building, which has already been utilized. And so I think it kind of varies. The other part of it is, you think about a day like today, I don't know that any of the students would be learning anything outside. And so it becomes that fine balance of how do we do our best to have students outside as much as we possibly can, and turn around and remind every parent, you can wear a coat, you can wear gloves, and you can wear a scarf, and you'll be okay. Kids especially, and try to be outside as much as possible, but with the understanding of each of the buildings is very different in how they would have to navigate that.
Thanks, Dr. DeVay. Mr. Redfern, you were starting as well?
Yeah, I was nothing drastically different than Shilpa had shared. Just I know that we have something in place, Dr. Mahan, via the elementary committee with the Encore in particular with physical education and a sort of a notification system, so to speak, when we were in the hybrid model about getting outside. So there was some things being put in place to sort of assist with, the outside piece where they would communicate, in advance, as predictable as weather could be, in advance, whether it would be a day, to be able to have students outside. And that would also, sort of pertain in general to just the school setting. Kids could go out for phys ed, then most likely, other kids as well, could go out during their classroom activities if they wanted. So there was consideration in the work of the committees for that. And there was something in place with that. I just wanted to add that piece because it's just sort of something that happens, but parents may not know that that was a plan that was put in place.
Thanks, Mr. Redfern. Dr. Mahan, do you want to add anything about the technological side?
Just the only thing that I would add is that, as Mr. Redfern said, with many of our Encore classes being able to function effectively outside, we've purchased numerous wireless headsets. We have provided numerous access points outside. I wish that Dr. Rickensrud was on this call this evening. Just the other day, he was ecstatic to be able to share with members of his school community as well as administrative colleagues that he took his device all the way to the edge of the Kilmer property. And for those of you who know that property, it's very large, and was able to speak about being able to be on a call with staff in a Teams meeting and still with great connectivity. So we are excited about the opportunities that the technology department has put in place for us to be able to continue outdoor learning with our students. The one thing that Dr. DeVay honed in on was that it will look different across our schools. But most importantly is that there is no inappropriate weather, there's just inappropriate dress. So parents, you can support us in the best way by making sure that your child has appropriate outdoor gear for learning in an outdoor environment.
Thanks, Dr. Mahan. And thank you to the technology folks. I did hear the story from Dr. Rickensrud from Kilmer as well about the range. And when we did have children in hybrid in November, I had the great opportunity to see some of our elementary PE teachers outside with their classes, teaching in the hybrid with students who were there and students who are online. Incredibly creative. Second part of Ms. Roth-Gutman's question was, if the Cherry Hill area remains coded orange on 119, will a tiered approach be considered with special ed students returning first to school? So again, the goal is to get everybody back into school that's signed up for the hybrid model on January the 19th. If there are additional community concerns or other issues that we are facing, certainly we will communicate those. Our goal is to get all of our students back. And certainly there's a number of questions we'll go through tonight that people asked about a tiered approach. We have talked about a tiered approach for the last 3 months. There is a way that if we had to, we could do that, a way for us to structure that. But right now we're looking at January 19th as everyone being back in the building. And then questions about if we require all staff and students to be tested prior to returning to hybrid. Will district consider randomly testing staff and students? And if so, please use a spit test. We do not have a plan to test all students and staff, nor do we have a plan to randomly test students and staff. There's a larger discussion that's involved with that that I know is existing right now at the state level about who can be required to be tested, who does the testing, and what does that look like. So right now, we do not have a structure or a plan in place to do that. And now we'll go back to our online folks, Mrs. Seidel.
Yep, thank you. Jessica Fingerman.
She just needs to unmute herself.
Right.
please.
Ms. Fingerman, we just need you to unmute yourself and then we'll be able to hear you.
Thank you. I got it now. It wasn't activated for me at first, and then it went rogue a little bit. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
I had a quick question about some of the physical structure of the school. So I know that some of the concerns of the staff related to ventilation, windows that may or may not have been able to open effectively, things like that. And so I wanted to know what is the latest about ventilation? I remember Dr. Malash had mentioned that none of the schools currently had the capability for MERV 13 or higher filtration systems, but I wanted to know in situations like that, has there been any movement in procuring that? And the second part of the question is, in cases where that cannot be accomplished, have windows been fixed and or HEPA filters been included in those spaces? So that way, you know, staff can feel a little bit more comfortable being in the school building. And then as parents, we can feel more comfortable sending our students into those buildings.
Thank you, Ms. Fingerman, for your questions. So the ventilation systems, as we have them, are up and they are running. You are accurate. I did say a number of times when the questions came out, we do not have any of our systems, our HVAC systems, that can run MERV filters at a 12 or a 13. In order to have systems, it would require a massive infrastructure change, which you're talking about tens of millions of dollars to replace the HVAC systems throughout our district. While we do have some updated systems in different spots throughout our district, the majority of what the HVAC that feeds our classrooms specifically, and I'm looking at it right now, you know, to my left are the old unit ventilators, the systems that were original to the building, which makes most of them more than 50 years old, which means that most of them are 25 years beyond what they originally designed for. A special thanks to our maintenance crew, our custodians, and our grounds crew for the work that these men and women have done since last April in maintaining them, in cleaning them, replacing the filters, and the constant checking and cycling through throughout the last 3 months to make sure that they are clean, filters are clean, and that they are working effectively. I can hear the air blowing right now through the unit ventilator. They bring in clean air from the outside. Our HVAC units continue to meet our indoor air quality plan, which you can find on our website under the We Return to Learn section. There were some windows that were not operable. I believe that there are windows that have been fixed. There may still be some windows that are not operable in the district. Again, because there are, as I said, with the HVAC, there are windows that are still in the district that are original to the buildings that we certainly would like to replace. There are certain spots in the district where there are additional HEPA filters that are being used. There are more than 1,000 ceiling fans or ceiling air circulators that are in the building that move the air in and move the air out that are operational. They have been checked, they are cleaned. This is an ongoing maintenance piece that's addressed by, like I say, by our staff. If something needs to be fixed, and again, in a district our size, there are times when things break down. You know, we have people on staff that do HVAC. We also have contractors that come in to address if there are issues.
Well, thank you so much for taking my call and answering my question. I really appreciate everything that you guys are doing.
Thank you, Ms. Fingerman.
Thank you. Next question?
Next question.
Okay, it's your turn to read.
So the next question is from Ruta Giannone and says, how does the district plan to rectify the inadequate education our children continue to unnecessarily receive? If we were in person, I would like to ask some qualifying questions about this question, but we are not. So I'm going to address a little bit of it and then see if Dr. Mahan or Dr. DeVay or Mrs. Wethington or Mr. Redford, anybody wants to add into it. As we transitioned back on March 16th to initially the remote instruction that took place, it looked dramatically different than what the instruction began with in September. I cannot thank enough our certificated and professional staff, our support staff, for the work that they have done to maintain a high level of learning and a high level of expectation. The continuity of learning that our staff members have provided for our students has been excellent. It is dramatically different what has occurred from September until today than any of us expected that it would be if we went back a year ago. It's even different than we thought that it would look when we got to August 1st. It has been a challenge. There is no doubt about it, but I'm incredibly proud of the dedication, the work, the creativity, and the effort that our staff members have put into maintaining a high level of education for our students. There are some things that occur in remote learning that cannot replicate what exists in a classroom. Again, we realize that and we know it. Our goal as a district remains to get our students back in the classroom with our staff members. That's what we want. That's what everybody, or not everybody, most people in the community want. And I will tell you that in-class instruction is what is best for most of our students. Now, please know that we also have students in our district who are thriving on the full remote instruction. We hear from parents, we talk to students who are absolutely thriving in this experience, which has been intriguing as well. Dr. Mahan and her We Return to Learn committees, they continue to meet, they continue to talk, they continue to be updated. We work with the principals, we get feedback, we get a lot of feedback from parents, we hear back from students. We go through and we do meetings with students just to find out about their experience. We take all of that in as we look at what it is that we are doing as we move forward. Dr. Mahan, you look like you're ready to add on.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Malash. So you just ended with the We Return to Learn committee, and just this morning, several members who are on this call participated in a We Return to Learn elementary committee meeting. And one of the top report outs from that committee was that the elementary teachers believe that they finally have momentum in our current model and that they are implementing the curriculum with fidelity and have continuity with students through the instructional strategies they've been able to deliver in the classroom. So I cannot say enough about how much as a district we have adapted to provide a high quality education for our students. Educators across Cherry Hill Public Schools across the country have participated in professional development, have collaborated with their colleagues. They've revised their lesson plans to deliver the high quality instruction in which our families are accustomed to. We continue to implement our curriculum with fidelity. And for that, I thank all of our teachers because they have definitely gone above and beyond to ensure that our students get everything that they need academically, socially, and emotionally. And I applaud their efforts because being in a classroom every day under the direct scrutiny that many of our teachers have received is exhausting. And I applaud their efforts for continuing to implement our curriculum with fidelity.
Thanks, Dr. Mahan. Mr. Redfern, were you?
Yeah, I want to, it's, again, I'll reemphasize what Dr. Mahan said as well as it's not the perfect situation. But I believe, the teachers have worked, diligently, for hours and hours to get this to the point where it is being successful. And I think sometimes, as an association president, I do talk to other locals and other association members and, as well as other parents who I know that, are in other districts. And as much as, there is some negativity there, I've also heard comments from people in other districts. I wish my son or daughter was doing what Cherry Hill's doing. So, I take a lot, when I hear that, I'm like, interesting, a different perspective, because, they see something that they appreciate or that they feel is working well in Cherry Hill that's not working in their district. But unfortunately, sometimes when you're just in your own district, so to speak, it's easier to not see those positives where I think my wife's cousin for one is an example of, she knows what my wife is doing on an everyday basis. And it's like, I don't understand why my district's not doing that. I'd be happy if my district was doing that. So there's a lot of positives. There's a lot of growth happening. Is it the same as if all the kids were in the classroom and the teachers were in front of them? No, it's not. And we're be kidding ourselves if we said it was the same, but I listen, every once in a while to my wife working with her kindergarten students. And, every day there's a child that's, new to our schools who has done something or is able to do something that they didn't do a week ago. that's growth, that's achievement, that's what we're trying to do, and that's what's happening. And again, a perfect world, sometime in the spring, maybe, we can all be back, and it's going to all, we're going to forget about this moment. But I feel like, the committees have worked hard. Dr. Mahan has led those committees. There's not always agreement, there's discussion, but it's collaborative, it's productive. And, we've gotten to a point, and I agree with Dr. Mahan this morning, there were many more positives from the teachers on the committee about what was happening currently, and getting momentum and seeing the growth and being able to accomplish more, in the model that we're in, that we're going to stay in, than they felt would have happened if we kept bouncing back and forth. So just my, 2 cents, nothing more, not much different than what was already said, but I'll let Shilpa go because I'm sure she probably wants to add to as a principal.
Thanks, Steve.
My principal lens on it is the level of feedback that I have received from Heart families has been incredibly positive. It's an awful situation to be in, but at the same time, for the first time ever, I think parents get the truest lens of what school looks like and what it sounds like and what it looks like to see your own children learning. That's probably the silver lining in the situation, because I've had so many parents that have reached out that said, do I wish my children were back in school 100% of the time? Yes. Do I wish that for my own sons? Without a doubt. There's no question that that is absolutely best case scenario. Given the situation that we are in, the number of parents that have reached out that say, I just want you to know, my son or daughter's kindergarten teacher is absolutely amazing, is truly a gift. And quite frankly, they're the best emails because I get to share them with the teachers, and I share them with the superintendent and the board of ed, and just kind of go, this is the good stuff. This is the stuff that's happening behind the scenes and behind the screens. And so I do agree. I believe that there is so much learning that is happening. It's a different type of learning. If you truly think about it, my second grader who walked over and flipped the screens on my computer today, second graders would not have known how to do that. Second graders would not have known how to turn around and type as quickly as they do right now, which when you think about the long term, that's a life skill that they are forever going to use. Is it the same skill that they would have learned a year ago in second grade? Maybe at a different pace. Right? But they are truly learning, and they are learning more than just the academics. They are learning the concepts of character in a very different way. They're learning empathy, they're learning resilience, they're learning grit. When their screen freezes on them and their teacher goes, okay, I want you to start reading right now, wait till I come right back to you. And they're doing that. And so they are learning a level of independence at an age that they did not have to do so before, but they're stepping up to the challenge, and so I do agree. I think there's a lot of incredible things that are happening that, for the parents that are lucky enough at times to be able to sit there and see it happen, it's pretty amazing. It is truly pretty amazing.
Thank you, Dr. DeBay. Go, Ms. Seidel, to the
Yep.
next person.
So next, Joyce Anna D. Alessandro. And you just have to unmute your microphone and we'll be able to hear you. Joyce Anna D. Alessandro?
There she goes.
Okay.
I didn't ask a question.
Your hand was raised, but
Oh,
that's okay. Thank you.
I apologize.
No problem. So next hand that I saw up was Ainsley Stevenson.
Hi, my daughter's in second grade, and I think the teachers are doing an amazing job for what they're dealing with. My question is, has there been any concern about, I don't really think the kids are getting, the full education that they would only being in school for hours, and while they're in school 4 hours, they're really just getting an education for 30 to 40 minutes a day, I would say. While our public school or private school kids are going 5 full days. And is the curriculum going to be corrected for our kids that are going to be falling behind versus the kids that are in the private schools? Has there just been any thought about that circumstance? Because
Thank you for the question. Dr.
Yeah.
Mahan is our Director of Curriculum and Instruction. Do you want to start?
So there has been conversation in regards to this term of learning loss, and I think we need to step away from that term and really think about some of the things that Dr. DeVay just mentioned in her comments for the previous question, that our students are learning so many more things: how to be resilient, how to work independently, how to navigate the technology. And, a few years ago, we talked about planning or preparing our students for the future, and we didn't know what that future was going to be like. Now our students are prepared. Our students can use the technology, they can navigate, they can advocate for themselves, and they are working through some of the challenges that they've experienced in remote learning. In regards to our curriculum, we have made adaptations across the K-12 spectrum to ensure that our curriculum is implemented with fidelity and that our students are receiving exactly what they need to be successful in the classroom and beyond. So you can see evidence of our adaptations on our assessments, on the instructional delivery that our teachers are providing in the classroom, and on day-to-day interactions. So Ms. Stevenson, yes, there has been consideration to what you're asking. We continue to pride ourselves on being Cherry Hill Public Schools, where we provide a preeminent education for all of our students, and our curriculum still speaks to that.
Thanks, Dr. Mahan.
Okay, next I'm going to read a question submitted by Tracy Hoffman. What exactly needs to happen in order for the hybrid option to return? Please be as transparent as possible, naming not just a drop in COVID cases, but everything that needs to happen in this district. The reason I ask is that we had every reason to go back in September, and yet we were prevented from doing so. That decision, along with a sudden and drastic change to a half-day schedule and a mere 3 days of in-school learning in November for hybrid kids, has damaged the Cherry Hill School District's reputation and our trust in it. We are afraid to have the rug pulled out from under our kids yet again. Please list all of the efforts being made to bolster the substitute teacher pool. It is difficult to fight for your child and their need for in-person learning when you really don't know what you are up against. In your opinion, from communicating with our schools, what is the percentage of Cherry Hill teachers that oppose a return to learn option? If the majority of our teachers are afraid of in-person learning, how are you addressing their concerns? I'm asking you to speak on behalf of teachers because there's no forum to address them directly. In your opinion, is there anything that will satisfy our teachers in terms of changes that would make them more willing to be back in school with their students?
Thank you, Ms. Seidel. I'm going to start. So what do we need for implementation of the hybrid schedule in January? We need to get to January 19th and remain at the status, at least where we are, where we stay consistent. If we are still in the orange status, which is the high risk, we do believe that we can manage with the students and staff being back in school on the 19th. Now, all things being equal, we have to go through the next month to see what that actually looks like. When I put the letter out on Friday, November the 20th, one of the things that we updated in there is that we said we would be out through January the 15th. And then on the week of January 11th, that Monday, we'd be evaluating with the status of what was going on in our community by looking with our partners from the Department of Health to find out what the current status in Cherry Hill is. Cherry Hill and Camden County have been challenged, especially over the course of the last month, with an increase in cases. While we look at the maps that the state provides, and Cherry Hill, Camden County, we fall into the Southwest category. Camden County is typically higher than what it is in the Southwest category because we're higher than what Burlington County has been in terms of the Cali score and in terms of the percentage of positivity. The Cali score, I believe, has been the same as the 3, as the entire state is in high risk. But we need to get to January 19th. When we sent the letter out on the 20th, and then we talked to people, one of the things we kept hearing from people was, listen, we have to plan our lives. I need to plan out. What is it going to be like for childcare for my children? What's going to be like to be in the classroom for instruction? What's it going to be like to be able to get kids back and forth? We're trying to be able to provide consistency and something that folks can count on and can plan for, which we know is a challenge. I understand the frustration. This has been an incredibly frustrating 9 months. I get it. And I was thinking this morning back to where we were on March 14th, which is 9 months ago. So March 14th was the morning after we announced that we would be closed for 2 weeks. And then we went through week in and week out until May 4th, when the governor announced that schools will remain closed for the rest of the academic year. The challenge, the frustration, the uncertainty of looking at what we were doing and what we had the control over and what we didn't have control over. So we're continuing to try to maintain that which we can control. And that's in the communication that we put out and providing a structure that's there. So what do we need to do? We need to get to January the 19th and not have Cherry Hill, Camden County end up in the red or the very high risk category. We can all in our community add to that in terms of being positive and following those mitigation practices to make sure that we're doing all we possibly can. Please list all efforts being made to bolster the substitute teacher pool. So we've done quite a bit. We contract out our daily substitutes with the local third-party vendor. We have worked with them in terms of trying to draw substitutes. Mrs. Wilson, our public information officer, has continued to post information through our social media. We've included it in our newsletter that goes out to about 14,000 people. We're encouraging those folks who qualify, whether it's students returning home from college, parents who may be home, grandparents who may have an interest, people that are looking for additional funds, that have the credits to be able to do it, to apply to be a substitute. It's a wonderful, wonderful experience to be able to work with children. There's a full process to go through to be vetted in order to be approved. So we're doing that. We have also posted, we've been interviewing for long-term replacement substitutes, people that we will pay $250 a day through June 18th to be on our staff. People that we don't necessarily have an open position for right now, but we will guarantee them, we will pay them $250 a day from the time they start through June 18th so that we can place them if there is a need, if somebody has to go out, if Mrs. Seidel had to go out for 2 weeks, or I had to go out for 2 weeks, or just to be able to use them as daily substitutes across the district. All across South Jersey, school districts are dealing with substitutes. Substitutes and having enough substitutes has continued to be a challenge over the course of the last 4 or 5 years or so. Our Human Resources Department, Ms. Adrian and her staff are very active in trying to draw additional substitutes in, as are our building principals. Some of the best recommendations that we get are from people in town, from our own staff members and people who are looking to sub. And the final piece was about not knowing what you're up against. What's the percentage of Cherry Hill teachers that oppose a return to learn option? I don't have a percentage of teachers. And I don't think that I would categorize it in talking with teachers and hearing from teachers that teachers oppose being in school with children. That's not the issue, right? Our overall responsibility as a school district is to make sure that we can do it in a manner that is safe in our schools and safe within our community. Our teachers want to be safe. Our students want to be safe. Our families want to be safe. And in a cogent manner, we need to do it so that we can get everybody into the buildings in a way that is safe. The teachers would much rather be in classrooms with their students. The teachers would much rather be in classrooms with their students, as would our support staff, as would our secretaries, our counselors, everybody that works here in the district. Schools, school buildings, the school district are built to have children in them. There is joy in schools because there are children. It's incredibly challenging for our staff to maintain the level of expectation, to maintain the level of instruction, and to teach in a remote model. It's very difficult. They don't have their normal tools they would have in the classroom. The kids are not there. One of the challenges I think that also exists as folks watch, as folks are watching their children participate in remote learning, is not most people, most adults do not actually have that experience as an adult of what goes on in a classroom for 6 hours a day. It does not look anywhere near the same as it does through a computer screen. There is a lot of time in a classroom where students are working, where a teacher's working in small group, or in pairs or one-to-one with students. It's not time periods of an hour or 45 minutes or 2 hours where there's some direct instruction that goes on. Even on the best days, there has never been 6 hours of direct instruction where a student is directly engaged with a teacher in our school district. That just is not real. Take out that transition time, take out the breaks, take out the different things that would exist in a classroom as part of an overall experience, and you look very different in terms of the time that exists. Dr. Mahan.
Dr. Malash, thank you for that very thorough answer. And Ms. Seidel, it is now 7:48 and we have gotten through approximately 7 questions. If we could try to shorten our response to get to a couple more questions from the participating attendees.
Thanks, Dr. Mahan.
Thank you. So next, we will take a question from Lauren Greenberg.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
So I'm sitting here listening to you guys, and I kind of feel like I'm listening to a totally different version of what's going on in my house and in many people that I've spoken with. The teachers are excellent. They're doing everything that they possibly can. I agree. But my 7-year-olds are burned out. They don't want to sit in front of the computer anymore. They're tantruming on the floor. This is not something that is sustainable. And you mentioned that you want to bring everyone back on January 19th. Mr. Redfern, I heard him say something about the spring. So I don't know what to believe, but I mean, if this date doesn't happen in January, I don't know how we insist that these young children sit in front of the screen anymore. I mean, they've essentially been doing this since March. I don't know. Maybe you have an answer to that.
I just want to clarify my answer with the spring. My spring answer was the idea that we would all be back, like maybe there is a movement with a vaccine. There's that, like that. That's my hope. My spring comment was not, January 19th isn't going to happen. It's going to happen in March or April. I'm a optimist and hoping that, not just Cherry Hill, but nationwide, and also the state, we can return to the normalcy that, we all had, prior to March last year. That was my comment to spring. So I just want to clarify that because, the reality is I would like to go into stores in the spring and not look down on the floor for a red spot that tells me how far I should stand. I'm hoping that all that goes away in the spring. Sorry,
Thank you,
Dr.
Ms. Greenberg, for the question. I hear your frustration. I understand that frustration. That said, I know that is probably the biggest challenge and the biggest concern that has come from so many families, right? Of what this looks like for their children, our youngest of learners and our most challenged of learners, about what's going on. And we want to have those kids back into school. And what do we do in the interim? What can we provide? Again, please make sure you're maintaining communication with the teachers. The teachers have done an incredible job to adjust what goes on in their lessons, how they're doing them, how they're delivering them, to try to be conscious of that and aware of that. Our teachers do not want kids that are suffering. I don't want kids that are suffering. I want families that are suffering. I mean, our society functions on the fact, right, that families want to be able to count on the schools, that the kids are here. That's how our world functions, and we get that. And I hear what you are saying and what other families are saying about how challenging it is. I do. I wish I had a better answer for you right now, other than continue day by day to work with the teachers, to contact the building principal, to find out additional supports that are available, because there are additional supports that we can suggest, that we can offer through the district, and information that we can provide.
Thank you.
Okay. Yep. You're next.
All right, so the next submitted question comes from Darcy Newton. She writes, Dr. Malash opted for a much more conservative closure than recommended by the Camden County Department of Health and other community peer schools who have been in meetings with him. What criteria relative to community spread of the virus in January is the superintendent going to use to determine reopening in January, especially compared to other community public-private schools that are continuing to remain open in a hybrid form through 2020 and keeping their commitment to parents who chose to send students in for Executive Order 175, that the opportunity is available. Thank you for the question. So a couple of things to go through. I meet with the Camden County superintendents in Camden County. We have formal meetings every week, and we meet with Dr. Nowako, who's the County Director of Health, so we can get updates on what's going on in Camden County. And again, Camden County over the last few weeks has been as high as the second county in the state in terms of number of cases, down to third and fourth at different times. So we take information from Dr. Nowako. When we make determinations, when we sit as an administrative group, or when I talk to others in the district about where we are, what's happening, and what we're going to do next steps, the discussion looks differently than it does for most of our neighboring school districts. The majority of the other school districts in Camden County would fit inside Cherry Hill as a district. With 11,000 students and 19 schools and 1,700 staff members, there's no district that even comes close to our size. So it's a different discussion just because of the breadth and the size of the school district, the number of students, the number of different challenges that exist with our buildings and with getting children into the buildings to be able to do it because of space and needs and size that are different than what it looks like in other school districts to go through. And have we been conservative? We have been conservative. Somebody early on, when we had discussions about what's going on with the pandemic and with the virus, and what continues to ring true for me is we will always know if we didn't do enough. We will never know if we did too much, but we will always know if we didn't do enough. Take very seriously the responsibility that we have: health, safety, and security. That's our primary responsibility for these 11,000 souls with the families entrust to us on a daily basis. Then add into that the 1,700 employees. There's about 13,000 people in this district on a daily basis. That is real. We take that into incredibly serious consideration about the impact. And yes, conservative, we have been conservative. There is no question about that. All right.
Okay. Next, we'll hear from Mrs. S. And if you could please let us know what your first and last name is, that would be great. Mrs. S. Okay, I'll move to Stephanie Polly.
Can you hear me?
We can, thank you.
Okay. So actually, the question I originally submitted was online. However, that's been answered a few times. I'd like to follow up with two comments that were made. One by Dr. Mahan, who stated, we'll know they'll be ready. This is in response to, I assume, going to the next grade level or to college or whatever the case is. How do we know they'll be ready? When I have two kids, one is in elementary, and when I add up her instructional time, she loses 1.5 hours a day. And that's just assuming on Mondays that whatever it is, learning that they do counts as learning. And a middle schooler who's losing 1 hour a day. So my kids are losing 7.5 in elementary and 5 hours a week of school. How do you know they're going to be ready?
So I'm not sure that I said we'll know they'll be ready, because we do not know what the impact of virtual and remote learning and the COVID-19 will have on not only students in Cherry Hill, but students across the country. That has been an ongoing conversation amongst educators. What I can say is that, and I believe what I said, is that we are ensuring that our curriculum is being implemented with fidelity, and that we have made adaptations to our curriculum to best support the learners in a virtual environment. And, I just want to go back. I actually just listened to a podcast for Harvard Education Cast, and there was a researcher on from the RAND Corporation. Her name is Jennifer McCombs. And one of the things that she was quoted in that podcast in saying is, it's really engaged time in academic learning that's creating the learning, not necessarily the number of academic minutes in a school day. And I think Dr. Malash has already touched on that the way our academic day is currently structured does not mirror the way our academic day is structured when students are in person. It does look different. Again, we're still providing a very similar experience with small group instruction, with direct instruction, with assessments being given, with students engaging with their teachers, with us addressing the social emotional learning piece that Dr. DeVay mentioned is so important for our students. So is the day shortened? Yes. Have we made adaptations to our curriculum? Yes. Are we implementing our curriculum with fidelity? Absolutely, because as Dr. Malash said, we want our students to be back in school just as much as everyone else on this call and members in the community. But we have been conservative in our efforts moving forward, and we will continue to ensure that we are providing professional development, that our teachers are collaborating, and that our teachers are meeting the needs of all the students in their classes.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Our next written question is from Rebecca Henry. I would like to know why Cherry Hill is one of the only districts in the Tri-County area that has not been able to get our children back in school for in-person learning, and what is your plan as a district to get our children back in the buildings as of the new return date?
So there are a handful of districts in the Tri-County area that have not returned to in-person learning at all during the 2020-2021 academic year. I believe that you will find that many of them are larger, some of the bigger districts that are around, whether it's Winslow, Camden, Lindenwold, just as examples of other ones that have not been in. We are prepared for our students to return to in-person learning. Again, right now, we need to get to January 19th. We need to continue to, as a community, not just folks that are in school, because there's a reality with community spread, encourage our neighbors, our friends, our families to do everything they possibly can do to mitigate the spread of the virus as there continues to be high numbers in this area. Back online.
Next up, we will take a question from June Garifano.
Yes, hi, can you hear me?
We can, thank you.
Great, thank you so much. So I just have a quick question, and I know most of the conversation today has been around academics, and obviously that's the most important thing for our children. But one of the things I'm finding, especially for my sixth grader who should have had an opportunity to meet upwards of 400 new potential friends at Beck this year, they're barely connecting at all with anyone. They have the same kids in this, not only in just their team, but team/cohort. I'm impressed with Beck next week. They are going to have an ice cream social by Zoom, which is great. But I think honestly, a little too late. I think that kind of thing should have happened in September to connect these kids more than just connected to their teachers and the learning. Are there any more district-wide or school-wide programs that are going to be out there to connect the children with each other beyond just being a face, or to be honest with you, it's really just a name on the computer screen, because most are not showing their faces. So, I think it's a huge piece of the learning that we're missing.
Thank you for your question, Ms. Garifano. Yes, I do believe that you will see additional activities after the first of the year that will occur at our schools. If you do have additional suggestions, don't hesitate, specifically in your case, to reach out to Mr. O'Connor. If there are other people that are listening and or watching, same thing, don't hesitate to reach out to your child's teacher, the building principal, the PTAs. I know that our PTAs also, as I meet with them each month, they've been talking about what other types of activities can they do to help keep students and families connected and engaged. That absolutely has been one of the biggest challenges dealing with the pandemic, is what can we do with kids to have them connected in a meaningful manner. So thank you for your question. Question from Lauren Greenberg. The district claims that all its buildings meet state guidelines and safety measures are strong. If that is the case, then what metrics is district using to drive the decision of whether to open? Did I answer this?
Well, we answered from another.
We answered from another question.
And Mrs. Greenberg did speak.
She did. Okay.
Just a moment ago.
Ms. Greenberg, I think we covered most of this, so we're going to move to the next one. The next one is from Jeff Potowitz. Dr. Potowitz writes, I stated at school board meeting that when the state calculated our SFRA funding, the state will use the 0.5 multiplier instead of 1, contrary to regulations and further underfunding our district. Was this corrected? Dr. Potowitz, Mrs. Sugars is following up, see where we are. Again, there's delays right now because of the delay in the state budget this year. So we should have additional information, hopefully, for the winter break. When we have that, we will let you know. Thank you for the question.
Okay, next on the line, Therese DeMedio. Hi, Ms. DeMedio.
Hi, Mrs. Seidel. It's so nice to see you and Dr. Malash. And I'm so proud that Dr. DeVay is there, as we've been directed in such a great way. And I guess my question to the group, or not even to you guys, is how are we as a faculty and staff maintaining our strength? Because I see in my building some wonderful things happening, and I know I'm not alone in that. And I don't know how the nurses are struggling to see how we can support our staff to keep their momentum going. They work so hard, and if anybody has had to try to teach a class, it's so hard, so hard. And I just want to ask Dr. Malash and Mrs. Seidel if you can think of any ways that the nurses as a group can support our wonderful, our staff and our parents.
Thank you, Mr. Video, for your question. So I think you asked a great question, especially right now at this time of year. I truly believe that people are exhausted. If you want to know the honest truth, I think our staff members are exhausted. I think our families are exhausted. I think our children are exhausted. I think this has been an incredibly trying time, beyond just the fact that it's physically trying because of the changes and being in, expecting to be in, and then being out, being in briefly, and then being back out. It's emotionally exhausting. And again, I think that's one of the hardest things for us as humans and as parents, especially dealing with children, to try to explain, to try to maintain. There has to be connection, right? There are basic needs that all of us have as human beings. We need to feel loved. We need to feel connected. We need to feel as we are a part of something. And again, I can come up with hundreds of examples from across our schools from last spring and since September when school came back in, of teachers supporting one another, of so many families and PTAs in large organized ways and in very small ways have supported our staff members. For the nurses, I think the work that we're 22 nurses now, I think, Ms. Dominio?
23, that's okay.
Right? That they've
Some of
done
us are
during the
bigger than
course-
others, 23.
that they have done during the course of the summer and the fall, to be that constant, to be the medical professionals, to be the ones who have been on campus, to answer the questions, to help calm the concerns, to let people know what's happening and what to do. I think this is one of the best gifts that we continue to have. Again, the human resource is the most important resource in our district. Those 1,700 employees that we have, the 11,000 children that attend our school district, and the nearly between 65 and 6,600 families that we know we represent here in Cherry Hill. That's what is keeping the school district going, are all of these individuals who are pulling together to make sure that we are doing the best for our kids.
Thank you. I would just like to remind everyone that's here tonight that this is a pandemic, and to judge anybody based upon what's been in the past, we've never had this course. So I would just say, be kind to each other, be healthy, and remember, this is a pandemic and you cannot learn if you are not healthy. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Tara.
Thank you. Next, we'll take.
Dr. Malash, I think, Dr. DeVay, did you want to jump in?
I just wanted to add a quick bit. One of the greatest things that I think parents and students can do for teachers, for nurses, for any staff members is words of gratitude. I don't know that people truly understand the value of gratitude, not only when they are giving it to someone else, but what it does for themselves. It is one of those moments where, and I've asked the teachers, especially my first year teachers, and I have quite a few this year, I said, please do me a favor and create your own book, create your own brag book. And every time you get an email or a positive letter or a card from a teacher, from a student, hold on to it. And when you have your roughest day, when you have those moments where you go, this is exhausting, and you wonder if you're doing the right things, and if you wonder if you're doing everything that you possibly can, and still wondering if there's a student that you're staying up because they're struggling, take that brag book out and look at it again and remind yourself that you're doing the best that you can and you're doing everything that you can. So those emails or those cards and the letters, the things that you send to your child's teacher, or your child writes and sends themselves, which is even better, please continue to do so, because sometimes that is the smallest piece, but the most powerful to keep us going in the days that are the hardest. So.
Dr. Malash, if I could just add, and it kind of popped into my mind because I see Cherry Hill Zone PTA. We had a meeting with them last week, and this is one of the things that, the Zone PTA had asked, and it's sort of the same thing, Dr. DeVay said, where I made the comment that, the little things mean the most. And, I talked about, room parents reaching out to the teachers, or parents just sending, kind thoughts, or, e-cards, whatever. And I think, Dr. DeVay's right. It's like the moments, like the kids bring it naturally every day. Like I listen to the kindergarten students, when my wife's meeting with them, and just their voices like make me smile, because they're just, no matter what it is, they're sharing, or they're, Mrs. Redfern, guess what like, because there's something that she's interested in and they're sharing. But, that the other piece of that is that, I agree, like, just one little quick email or a message on whatever communication tool, that, the teacher's using with the parents. It just says, hey, I loved, that my daughter was able to do X, Y, and Z. I'm so thrilled that you're her teacher. It goes a long way. And, I, taught for years, and, those, I still have, probably somewhere buried in my garage under all my wife's teaching resources are the letters that I've saved from kids, that wrote me, whether I was coaching or whether I was a teacher, something that they wrote at the end of the year that I wanted to save, and I wanted to keep it. And it's a great message, Dr. DeVay. I'm glad you shared that.
Thank you.
Thanks, Steve.
Next, we're going to read a question from Kimberly Zemsky. Are you going to consider a tiered approach to returning our kids to in-person learning? Are you going to advocate for our younger learners and special needs children to get back to school sooner than later, since this virtual platform is failing them the most? Since you continue to place the burden of the reason schools are not open on the teachers, what have you done to ensure opening come January 19th for hybrid? Have you surveyed the teachers to consider their greatest fears and reasons for not returning, and taken any steps within reason to alleviate these concerns? Why does it appear that every other county is advocating for at least the choice for in-person and has been making it work except Cherry Hill?
Thank you, Ms. Seidel. So we've talked about the tiered piece already. I would say I don't believe that I'm putting the burden on returning on the teachers. I will tell you that we need to be able to staff our buildings in order, as much as I would love to be back in the classroom teaching, I think I would be a much better teacher today after watching some of the teachers that we have in our district. What are we doing to ensure that we can open come January 19th? We have planned for it. We've announced the date. We have shared the information with our staff. Our staff is expecting that we will be returning on January the 19th and continue to ask people, encourage people, remind people about mitigation practices and ways to help stop the spread within our community. We can all make choices. We all do make choices. The hardest part are those individual and personal and family choices that we make that make it very difficult right now, especially in the short term, but are beneficial in the long term to go through. I have sent a survey out, the responses from staff members where they have been and have been expressive about concerns. Tell you that I believe that we are attempting and advocating to bring students back into the school. We demonstrated that we successfully brought students back into the school for, yes, a short period of time. Unfortunately, with what was going on in the county at the time, with the spike in the cases that occurred, we did not have students in that long. And rather than bounce back and forth with the uncertainty, again, as the numbers continue to be high, we provided a structure and a time frame so that people could plan, families and staff members alike.
Thank you. Next,
Dr.
we'll hear from-
Malash and
Yes.
sorry, Dr. Malash and Mrs. Seidel, it is now 8:14. We have time for probably 3 more questions before our last question from a viewer at 8:25.
Thanks, Dr.
Thank
Mahan.
you. Next, we'll hear from Joseph Shin. Joseph Shin.
Says that he's unmuted. Dr. Shin, it says that you're unmuted. Can you hear us?
Okay, we'll move over to, the name is Haas, H-A-A-S. If you could let us know your first name as well, please.
It's Jamie Haas.
Thank you.
And I wanted to find out that they actually, he didn't discuss the tiered approach previously, that he said that he had discussed the tiered approach and that I'd be interested in hearing if, I don't believe it would be harder for the teachers if some of them started sooner than others to get the younger students, especially back into school, that my daughter's in 1st grade and she's struggling with the hybrid.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Haas. So in terms of discussing, we've been talking about a tiered approach and if we could make it work since earlier in the fall. And with a tiered approach, by bringing in different students and different levels of students, you know, starting with one group and then continuing to build on it as would appear in a tier. I understand your perspective. There are challenges that are associated with it, especially dealing when we are in the orange high risk category. As well as, you know, one of the challenges that comes along with being in the high risk category is we've dealt with situations when we had students back in school in the hybrid, that because we were in the orange category, if somebody was in the classroom and was either positive or demonstrating or exhibiting COVID symptoms, then everybody in that classroom was considered to be a close contact. So we had situations where children were in class with a fever or other symptoms were sent home, sent out, as were the other 4 or 5 children, multiple staff members, all that are affected to go through. That has, again, there's a domino effect once that starts to occur with positive test results coming in and affecting staff members and students within buildings. We do continue to look at that. We do not believe that we're going to be able to, in fact, we're not going to be able to make that happen at this point. That's why we're looking at January 19th with the relaunch of the hybrid schedule. All right, the next question came from Carolina Bavad. I believe that we answered it. The next question, written one, comes in from Nick Bavad. The question is, what are staff safety concerns and how are you addressing them? What agencies, departments, or healthcare representatives are you meeting with on a regular basis to inform your return to Lynn return to learn decisions. I think some of the staff safety concerns are very basic in the fact that they want to make sure that they're in an environment that is safe for them and safe for the students, about worrying about being exposed. And if they are exposed, then taking that exposure home to their own families. They're worried about what else is going on. And again, when we look at the numbers in our community and the numbers that not just in Cherry Hill or in Camden County, but throughout the state and throughout this area, as there's continued to be an increase in positive cases. I would say encapsulated, those are some of the biggest concerns and at the root of the concerns that the majority of our staff members have. What agencies, departments, or healthcare representatives are we meeting with on a regular basis? So weekly I meet with the other superintendents in Camden County, represents the public school superintendents, the charter schools, and the Diocese of Camden. We meet all once a week. We meet with the County Department of Health, with the county director. I meet on a regular basis with superintendents from across the state. We meet with the County Department of Education, with the Executive County Superintendent. Again, she brings information from the State Department of Education, as well as the information that comes down from the governor's office, gets filtered through the Department of Education as well. In terms of healthcare representatives, Virtua Health are our school doctors. When we have questions, concerns, when there are answers that we are looking for, we go through Virtua. That's who we use. In a community like ours, there are many medical professionals that live here in town and that have children in our school district. I've had many people reach out to me with information, with suggestions, doctors, nurses, immunologists, people with different backgrounds and different experiences, some who are working in hospitals, some who are working in private practice, some who are working in larger practices. And that's a pretty regular occurrence as well. Okay.
Hey.
So, Shannon, or you just reps?
We'll just skip that. Sorry, the hands just changed. Miriam Stern.
Yes, hi. I just want to ask, are you open to having a group of parent experts who work perhaps in the medical field or perhaps work in air quality, HVAC, to help be advisors as you go through? I know this, question has come up in the past, and I understand, for liability purposes, for, you can't pay families, but, volunteers, and you can't have them be the sole folks advising you on this information. But, perhaps we do have quite a few people in Cherry Hill who are experts in their field in these areas specifically. So are you open to engaging perhaps, a couple of advisory groups as you move through this to support all of the other information and efforts you're making to make these decisions?
Thank you, Ms. Stern. I'm always interested in hearing from people in the community and meeting with people in the community. I think that, I'd be interested to know, or just get perspective on, what you mean by advisory, because again, in terms of decision-making power, decision-making process, which we can always take information in, you would go through the administrative side or through the board. But yes, I am always interested in hearing from people and meeting with people to hear their perspective and their experience and how we can apply people's perspective and their experience to the school district.
Thank you. Next, we'll hear from Shauna Ricchetti. What kinds of policies will the district create regarding vaccines for staff and students? For example, requiring versus not. What kind of information timeline have you received from the state or county related to distribution of the vaccine for school teachers, staff as essential workers? Will the % of vaccinated staff and or student population be considered in the return to in-person instruction?
So as of right now, we do not have plans to create any district policies regarding vaccines specifically related to COVID. There are very specific state guidelines that we follow and are required to follow. We will wait for additional direction from the legislature and the State Department of Health about next steps that we need to take in terms of people being vaccinated and requiring the vaccination and what that looks like.
Dr. Malash, if I could just add, I was at a meeting today where they the same thing that you just echoed, that the legislature right now is sort of, I don't want to say discussing, but it's a topic right now that they're discussing, and I don't even know that they really know their direction at this point with it, because there was also things that were, and you and I have talked about this last school year about vaccines being mandated just in general for students. And then also there was talk previous to COVID-19 about flu vaccine or flu shot being also mandated at the legislature. So I think that's a big lift and discussion that they will have, and then provide direction from what I was told today, because I don't know that all the members of the legislature agree on what that would look like or should look like as well.
Thanks, Steve. All right, Neat, right?
Yep.
Back to submitted questions. Laura Baduco, she submitted a question. It does match, it appears, the information from previous questions. Andrew Bush submitted a question. You have made conflicting public statements about whether the district is considering a tiered return to offer in-person learning for special needs and elementary students. Please clarify, are you considering a tiered return? Why or why not? So again, we've talked about that. We have considered a tiered return throughout the course of the fall and even now into December. We are not able to do so at this time. And we are looking for a full return in the hybrid model on Tuesday, January the 19th.
So the next, we have a hand up from Scott. If you could please tell us your last name.
Hi, actually, this is Jill Gutman. This is Scott's wife. Thank you for taking my previous question, and wanted to thank the wonderful teachers. As a follow-up, my question was about outdoor learning, about sitting outside without a computer, with a book and a notebook, not with technology. I was thinking old school style learning, for instance, like when I was in 7th grade in the 90s, early 90s, my English class was literally conducted outside, or in 1918 when school was held outside. So I'd like to see some creative solutions to make our staff and the students comfortable. And then specifically also, you keep saying we're not able to do a return under the tiered approach. Why not? I think the people are want to know specifically why not that tiered approach. Why will that not work, especially for the special ed students?
Thank you, Ms. Roth-Gutman. So we're not able to do a tiered approach right now. We're not able to appropriately staff all of the classrooms in the way that needs to be staffed in an equitable manner across the district.
So thank you. And what about the other creative solutions or options that we had talked about that you had said existed? And why not just that old school style outdoor learning model? If you drive by Haddonfield Friends School, you'll see 12 open tents with tables outside. Why can't something like that exist for the nicer days when it's not, I understand Shilpa's comment, on a day like today, obviously it would not work well. We have snow coming in 2 days, but I'm looking forward to, when it is warmer out and the weather's more consistent outside, because let's face it, there are going to be kids that come to school with fevers that are going to have to be sent home that need to be tested, or teachers, and the possibility of us being in this orange zone, it's pretty high likelihood that that's going to exist still come January and possibly into February. So I'm trying to look further out so that way we can have so we can have something to salvage, this school year. You know what I mean?
I do, Ms. Roth-Gutman. So, we're talking about a dramatically different scale in what Haddonfield or Morristown Friends is doing compared to what we would be doing in the school district here. Again, whether it's just across 12 elementaries or we go across all 19 of the buildings that exist. So there's a dramatic difference in size. There's also a difference in communicating what those expectations are on a daily basis with the flexibility depending upon what the weather looks like. As an example, with as much precipitation and moisture that's on the ground right now, we would not be able to come back and have children back outside, in an idyllic sense, or even in a not idyllic sense, even with winter coats and hats and gloves, probably over the course of the next week or so. There are a number of other factors that fit in when, like I said, when we try to do it in an equitable manner, depending upon the size of the class, the number of the classes, allergies that children have, which again are widespread, physical abilities or disabilities that may exist, what the impact is for that. So there are absolutely ways that we can do it in every one of our schools, but to plan for it on an alternating day basis in each of our schools in a district our size with the challenges that exist just is not a practical reality to say that we could decide day to day or even week to week to be sending kids in on the outside. I would also contend that education in 1918 looked dramatically different than it does today in terms of who was being offered an education, who was being provided an education, and where and how that took place. But I do appreciate the suggestion. I think some of the outside learning spaces that exist at each of our schools are taken advantage of. I think they've been taken advantage of or will be taken advantage of more as we get into the spring than they probably ever have been before. As teachers who are incredibly creative at their craft want to make sure that they're providing an experience that's beneficial for their students.
Thank you. So Dr. Malash, I see two unique questions left written
Okay.
that I'd like to be able to get to from Megan Ahrens and Eric Brenner, and then we have one additional hand from Maya Ortega.
Sounds
So
good.
maybe we can wrap up with just those three.
Yes.
I'm being proactive, Dr. Mahan, because I knew you were going to break in.
I had just unmuted myself.
So Megan Aaron's question is, LaQuay Wethington told me via email, as it relates to my son's IEP, that Cherry Hill Public Schools are in the process of identifying providers who are willing to offer in-home services. What providers have been considered, and when can this be delivered as an option for parents struggling with related services such as OT in the virtual space?
I can jump in there, Mrs. Seidel. We have worked with the current contracted providers to see who has the capacity and the willingness to provide in-home services during COVID-19. We've identified those that have the willingness and the capacity. And then for additional services, we've had to go to contractors that we're not familiar with. We've been holding some meetings, gathering information. We have a few contracted providers who are both willing and interested to provide in-home services. We will move forward with those providers, assuming that we can do background and everything comes up appropriately. So we should have some services in place shortly.
Thank you.
Certainly.
Next, we'll take our last online comment from Myra Ortega.
Hi, good evening. Everybody can hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So I want to thank all of you for doing what you're doing, all faculty and staff. Thank you so much. And my question is, given if we go back to in-person instruction in January, what are the expectations of our students regarding meeting the requirements of the state testing based on what they have learned remotely if the state proceeds with testing in the spring? Will the curriculum change based on the circumstances?
Good question, Mr. Ortega. Thank you. Dr. Mann, you want to?
Yes, I can jump in and answer that question. That's a great question. And actually, we have a testing office where Ms. Faith Holmgren and Mrs. Val Smidge-Sadwin are our coordinator of research and assessment and our testing coordinator. They are in constant contact with the Department of Education as well as other educators who are responsible for testing within the districts. We have not heard yet dates for state testing and what the expectations are for state testing yet. So as soon as we become aware, we will communicate that information out to the community. but our curriculum is designed already to meet the New Jersey Student Learning Standards. So we do not anticipate making any drastic changes to our curriculum.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Peace, please. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. The thought has come up a couple of times in the conversations about students coming back to school and the amount of instruction that is lost. It's one of the greatest skill sets that teachers have is the ability to assess where a child is coming in and planning instruction from there. If you think about what a kindergarten teacher does in the beginning of a school year, there are kids that will come in that literally make mountains for letters, and there are kids that come in as readers. And in the very beginning of a year, that teacher will turn around and assess in multiple forms to then decide, okay, I've got a group of readers, I want to keep them moving from where they're going. And then there are the students that I need to teach letter formation and letter sounds to, and they create groups based on that. And they are able to push these students that come in not knowing their letters to readers by the end of a year. And so I don't want us to forget that teachers are incredibly proficient at assessing where students are coming in and getting them to where they need to go. Just because they're on a screen right now does not mean that they're not learning. And it does not mean that they're not meeting their academic goals for their grade levels. Sure, are some students having a greater experience than others right now? Absolutely. That would be happening in school too. There are certain students that naturally flourish. There are some students that struggle. My son, I've got one that's flourishing. I've got one that's struggling a little bit. And so it becomes that balancing act that, quite frankly, it's the reason they call teaching an art and a science. The art of it is the teachers bringing in their passion, their expertise, their knowledge, and that science part is turning around and clearly assessing where every child is coming in to decide where to focus the instruction. So I want to make sure that the parents and community members clearly understand that whether the students are on a screen or whether they are coming back to us physically in the building, we will figure out where they are and we will get them to where they need to go. They're the reason we do what we do each day.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. DeVay. You read the last question.
Okay. Our last question of the evening is from Eric Brenner. Given the latest figures provided by New Jersey and the Camden County Health Department, what are the thresholds that Cherry Hill School District would even consider opening up schools again?
Thank you. So again, if all things being equal, if we remain in the orange, in the high risk, with the planning that we have done, knowing what's going on between now and January 19th, we would be able to open on January 19th in a hybrid model in a controlled way based on who is in the building. If Camden County, Cherry Hill ends up in being very high risk or red, which we were led to believe a couple of weeks ago that that's where we were going to be going into Thanksgiving weekend, and that did not materialize in that manner, then we would not be able to open. And that's just a directive that comes down specifically from the state. And the orange high risk, the consultation about how we're delivering instruction must be considered. So that goes into what takes place. Beyond that, though, we are ready for students to return in the hybrid model on Tuesday, the 19th.
Great. Okay. Thank you.
All right, so that brings us to about 8:36. Mrs. Seidel, Mrs. Neary, some closing thoughts?
Mrs. Neary?
Thank you. Sorry about that. Struggling with my technology this evening. I just wanted to thank everybody on the panel, our teachers, our staff, our administrators who are home right now, hopefully resting and well, and our students, the families. I know it's hard, and they see us during the board meetings, and they, it's not a two-way dialogue, and it's very challenging. I don't want our families to think that we're sitting there and we're not listening. We hear you. We're parents, some who have older children, some younger. I have a mix, and going through many of the same pains as the rest of you, many of the same pains. My youngest is struggling. His teacher is doing an amazing job, preparation, being at the ready, doing her best to get them to engage. He's just having a hard time. So I hear your pain. I feel your pain. And I've got another child that, although he's having a hard time with his anxieties, dramatically so, he's getting it done. But that's not the case for some of them. And I cry as much as they do some days. And quite frankly, so does my husband. He probably is right now. It's bedtime. So we're there with you. And I just want our families and our staff and everyone to know and understand that. And please be safe, enjoy the holidays, and stay well.
Thank you, Mrs. Neary. I'd like to echo some of Ms. Neary's thoughts. Thank you so much to our community members for sharing your thoughts and perspectives with us. Please keep the communication coming. As Mrs. Neary mentioned, we are always interested in hearing from the community. I'd like to thank our esteemed panel. Thank you so much for answering as many of the questions that we could get to today, and we appreciate your detailed answers. And stay safe, happy holidays, and I'll turn it over to Dr. Malash to wrap us up.
Thank you, Mrs. Seidel. I read the same thing. I'd just like to echo a thank you to everybody who was participating with us online. I think at our peak, there were about 215 people who were attending. So thank you all for being here. This has been recorded. This will be uploaded to our YouTube channel, most likely by late tomorrow afternoon, so you'll be able to find it. Immediately following this meeting, we're going to launch another thought exchange. You'll be able to find the information directly on our website. Again, sharing information, your perspective about where we are and what's going on. We will continue to have virtual town hall meetings throughout the spring, January, February, March, April, and into the later spring. We'll be releasing those dates most likely next week. We'll be talking about not just the virtual learning and not just about the pandemic and the situation, but other things that are going on in the school district as well, our current status, our future status, where we are, and what's taking place. Thank you for sharing your voice. Don't ever hesitate to reach out to us. And again, remember, especially those of you parents, the challenges that you're experiencing, they are incredibly, incredibly difficult right now. We hear you, and we feel your frustration and understand where you are with what's going on. Learning is a continuum. Learning occurs over a period of time. Children do not learn the same way at the same time on the same day. And again, what Dr. DeVay talked about, the experience and the excellence of our staff. This is where I raised my children. All 4 of my girls came through. There is no better staff around than the teachers and support staff members and professionals here in Cherry Hill, that if we had to experience a pandemic, which we are, there's no better staff than the folks who work here in this district. So I think we're incredibly fortunate for that. Thank you for your support of our staff members. Thank you for the thanks that you offer. We have a board meeting next Tuesday.
Yep, good. I just wanted to thank,
Yeah, absolutely.
before I forget, thank you. Sorry for interrupting. Thank you to Ms. Carol Matlack and to Ms. Kim Friedel, who are both on the line out there listening as well, 2 of our board members. So thank you so much. I just wanted to make sure people knew that they were out there listening as well. Thank you.
You are welcome. Thank you, Mr. Wisely, Mrs. DeStefano, who are on with us on the panel. We didn't have any questions directed their way, but thank you folks for being here. It's a pleasure to have you. And to our technology folks, Mr. Plavinsky and Mr. DiCarlo, we are grateful for your work. And I think this brings us to the end. Stay safe.
Thank you, everybody. Have a great night. Good night. Thanks for joining us.